As you may have already seen in the news, a document called Operation Yellowhammer has been released, which essentially shows what could happen if no-deal Brexit takes place. Now, this document was put together by a number of civil servants. And let's have a look at the actual front page. As you can see, there are a lot of bullet points, and each one of them will go into detail of how the world is going to end if Brexit happens in October. But interestingly enough, we know that since the news came out, and actually a few weeks ago when the rumors about the leaked document was mentioned in the news, Remainers have been panicking. They have been stockpiling with avocados and their beans, and I don't know what they eat, but I don't know. They are panicking because this is the end of the world. But when you look at the actual document itself, look at the top bit. Reasonable worst case planning assumptions. Worst case. Now, this is typical bureaucracy in action. Nigel Evans, the Conservative MP and one of the biggest campaigners for Brexit, said this earlier.
With the publication of the Yellowhammer report, Remainers have gone into absolute overdrive about what's contained in it, despite the fact that they know that the authors were asked to think of the incredibly worst case scenarios without any mitigation that could befall us after we leave the European Union. I've flown hundreds of times over the years, and on each occasion I've had to endure the flight safety video. That is a worst case scenario, and if I thought it was even possibly or remotely likely that the plane was going to crash, then I wouldn't get on a plane. And it's the same if I asked them to think of the worst case scenario when you get out of bed in the morning. If you think of the worst thing that could befall you without any mitigation whatsoever, you just simply wouldn't get out of bed.
And he's absolutely right. Let's have a look at an example of a leaflet you get when you get on the plane, which shows the emergency exits and what you have to do in case of a crisis. Now imagine if you were to get a plane ticket, and someone obviously mentioned, as you already know, that there is a possibility that something could happen, but we have to be fully prepared with our jackets and everything. You still get on the plane. It makes absolutely no sense if you say, well, that's it. All planes are going to go down, and that's why I'm never going to travel again. What are you, Greta Thunberg? But the document also assumes two other scenarios. One is if the government is not fully prepared. Now, we know that under Theresa May's government, they didn't fully prepare. But they had the DEX2 department, and they had a number of civil servants working on kind of no-deal planning. But then they kind of stopped it because Philip Hammond pushed Theresa May to essentially cancel those plans because they had no actual desire to leave the European Union by the end of March without a deal. But now the government under Boris Johnson have accelerated the no-deal planning. That's one bit, and Boris is going to be actually mentioning this in this video.
This is a worst case scenario which civil servants obviously have to prepare for. But in the last few months, and particularly in the 50 days since I've been Prime Minister, we've been massively accelerating our preparations. If we have to come out on October the 31st with no deal, we will be ready, and the ports will be ready, and the farming communities will be ready, and all the industries that matter will be ready for a no-deal Brexit. In reality, we will certainly be ready for a no-deal Brexit if we have to do it. I stress again, that's not where we intend to end up.
And the second bit actually goes to the businesses across the country. But before we talked about that specific part, let's have a look at the Brexit Central's reaction to the Yellowhammer document. The Brexit Central has said that this is a common misunderstanding of what risk assessments are about. For example, the Bank of England published its own no-deal study in November last year, which referred to some very large falls in GDP. However, in the words of the bank itself, this analysis includes scenarios, not forecasts. Bank economists deliberately chose extreme assumptions to produce worst-case numbers, mainly for the purpose of stress testing the financial system. Other parts of the report are highly speculative. For example, it is suggested that a rapid single electricity market split could occur months or years after EU exit, which could lead to significant electricity price increases. But why? There is no good reason to expect this. Similarly, there's a section on the risk to the adult social care market from an increase in inflation following an EU exit. Again, why? Is this really the biggest issue in this sector? When it comes to public sector and the governmental departments and agencies, that's the job of the government, and it has nothing to do with the actual exit itself. Because, for example, when it comes to social care budget, that's the job of the government to make sure that they are flexible to increase the budget and actually to reform the system because it's a mess. But the government are now introducing things like this for businesses to be prepared. The governmental website has a page where if you are an individual or a business, you could get ready for Brexit, and you essentially follow a number of steps to make sure that you are. Now, this goes back to personal responsibility, whether you're a business or an individual. Julia Hartley-Brewer on Talk Radio was talking to an SNP spokesperson, and this was the conversation they had.
But the planning assumptions are about, things like public disorder, massive long delays of days at the ports and the airports, a massive rise in electricity prices, food shortages, rioting on the streets. Do you really think that that's what's going to happen?
Well, the Yellowhammer documents make clear that huge numbers of businesses are unprepared. You see, there's been so much Brexiting politics going on, there's been no blinking preparation going on.
But we know that's ongoing now, though, don't we? Would it not be easier for businesses to prepare if they actually believed it was going to happen? If everyone in the country said, right, this is going to happen and this is what we're going to do. We all know exactly what the situation is going to be and this is what we're going to do. When we still have these sort of machinations, is it, isn't it? Will there be a delay? Will there be a letter sent to Brussels on October the 19th? When we have is that not part of the problem?
No, I don't think it is part of the problem.
Of course it's part of the problem, but it's not just the government itself, because if you're a business or an individual, sole trader, and you're saying that October is coming really quickly and we're not really fully prepared for a no-deal scenario, are you kidding me? You've had literally over 3 years between June 2016 and October 2019. For the love of God, I mean, whoever your God is, Jesus, Moses, Batman, you have to be prepared and you have to take personal responsibility. And that's the problem we have in the West right now, because every individual and business are so reliant on the government and bureaucrats to run their lives. We don't take responsibility anymore for what we do and for our own actions. And we all expect the government and politicians to tell us if things are about to change. Take responsibility, do your own life, and fix the problems. But all this doom and gloom about economics have no impact on people's minds. For people who voted leave, or people 1/3 of Remainers, as we mentioned in yesterday's video, who have now changed their mind and are now fine with Brexit, because that's not why people voted Brexit. The columnist Charlotte Gill wrote about this today. For starters, Brexiteers aren't as bothered about economic pain as Remainers are. In the lead up to the referendum, Leavers received all sorts of bleak warnings about the price the UK would pay for leaving the EU. Some think things can't get any worse for them than they are now. Others feel that the shockwaves are worth it. That's how much they wanted to leave the EU. Remainers have the tendency to forget that leave was generally a philosophically driven argument, motivated by a quest for sovereignty and democratic control. It has always been hard to dismantle with economic arguments. And Charlotte is absolutely right. I don't really think Remainers are ever going to understand the point of Brexit, whether they're going to bring up things like economics or border control or any of that stuff. It is simply about sovereignty and democracy. Take back control. In other news, as we saw yesterday, a Scottish High Court ruled against the prorogation, well, the advice that Boris gave to Her Majesty on prorogation. But today we had some good news from another court in Northern Ireland. A judge at the High Court in Belfast has dismissed a legal challenge against a no-deal Brexit. One of the 3 cases brought was by the victims campaigner Raymond McCord, who plans to appeal the decision. The court heard arguments that a no-deal would have a negative effect on the peace process and endanger the Good Friday Agreement. But the judge said that the main aspects of the case were inherently and unmistakably political. What Brexit got to do with peace in Northern Ireland? It makes absolutely no sense. And I'm glad that judges in Northern Ireland saw some sense and dismissed this idiotic case. And finally, let's talk about Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. I know Brexiteers are quite split on this because some obviously are Brexit Party supporters and some are Conservatives. and a lot of people don't really see parties. They just want to unite to get Brexit done. So they would prefer to see Nigel and Boris to work together. Now, Boris Johnson has refused to work with Nigel Farage publicly. Boris Johnson rejects Nigel Farage's offer of non-aggression pact at the next general election. Well, firstly, it depends when the election is. If the next election is going to be before Brexit, then of course, some sort of agreement is good, because otherwise Remainers could win more seats. But if the election is after Brexit, what is the point of the Brexit Party? But going back to the whole point of Boris and Nigel working together, I know a lot of people are quite concerned and upset that Boris has rejected Nigel's offer. But firstly, you have to understand that publicly, political parties work differently. And the PR game that they play is completely different. Obviously, Boris Johnson, as a leader of the Conservative Party, can't really publicly come out and say, yes, we are the oldest and most successful political party in the world, but we are in need of support and we are in a weak position. Of course, he's never going to say that, so don't expect him to make any public announcement. But also, don't be surprised if there are already backroom agreements between the Brexit Party and the Tories. So let's not just take our information from what we see in the mainstream media or what the leaders say. But let's just wait to see how it goes. And the election could actually come after Brexit, and we could actually leave the EU by the end of October. That is still the default position. And as I said yesterday, there is one way that Remainers could stop Brexit, and that is by voting to revoke Article 50. But let's just see how that goes. Anyway, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, or here, you could interact with me there. I'll reply to you. And if you want to support the channel, you could become a member of the Cabinet Club. The link will be in the description as always. And we'll be doing this every day, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. So if you want to follow up, make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell next to it. Otherwise, you won't be notified if my videos come out. And have a great evening. I'm my Tousi, and I'll see you tomorrow with a new video.